Hello, I'm Jackie Kramer and welcome to Makeover Magic. In this tutorial, I'm going to work with the new masking options in Lightroom 11 to change a black background into a colorful one. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's begin by editing this orange tulip. This was light painted with a shutter speed of 4 seconds, an aperture of 9, and an ISO of 125. It was made with my Canon R5 body and my RF 100mm macro lens. Let's start in the Develop module in the Basic panel. I'm going to lower the highlights just a little bit, and I'm doing this because of the upper edge of the petals on the right-hand side. I'll take those down to -11, and then I'm going to go down into Vibrance and Saturation and bring those up into the low teens. So there's nothing very specific about the numbers I'm choosing. I'm just keeping an eye on my oranges and reds to make sure that I don't oversaturate them and start to lose detail. The next thing I'm going to do is look up at the histogram, and I know that I'm not clipping anything here, but if I'm not sure, I'm going to press the letter J to turn the clipping alert on, which will show you on the image itself whether or not you've lost any detail in the shadows or in the highlights. But I am going to darken the black. So I'm going to go to the black slider under tone and lower it down until I start to see that I have a good separation between my subject and the background. Okay, let's turn that clipping alert off. Just press the letter J again, and that looks good to me. And in fact, if I were just doing a light painted tulip, I would stop right here. I want to play a little bit with the tools that we have available to us in Lightroom. So we're going to go into the masking panel. We can access that by clicking on the little circle with a dashed line around it in the top of the right-hand column. Just click that and it will show you the new tools. Most notably, the Artificial Intelligence, or AI, Select Subject and Select Sky. You'll also see the 3 tools that we've had in Lightroom: the brush, the linear gradient, and the radial gradient, all of which can still be accessed with the keyboard shortcuts K for brush, M for linear gradient, and Shift M for the radial gradient. I love keyboard shortcuts. I don't use them all the time, but for those tools and things that I've grown accustomed to use them for, they make things much more streamlined. You also have color range and luminance range, which can be operated independently of the brush, linear gradient, and radial gradient. So that's awfully nice. So we are going to work with the Select Subject mask in this example. So we're just going to click on that, and you'll see when it begins to do its work, a little message at the bottom indicating that it's working to select the subject. Before we analyze the mask, I want to draw your attention to the overlay options. You can access them by clicking on the little square of color in the lower right portion of this mask panel, or clicking on the ellipses here. Let's just click on that color square and have a look. Starting with the overlay mode, you can toggle between different displays. Okay. I'm going to go back to the color overlay, which is what I'm used to. You can change the color of your overlay by just clicking in the color picker, and you can also vary the opacity here. You have a nice slider, as well as change from the affected to the unaffected area. So I'm going to go ahead and come back to what I've been used to. I'll use the affected area, bring the opacity up. I'll choose a pink color for this example, and I will close that set of options. All right, I want to work on the background instead of my subject, so I need to invert this. So I'm going to come over to the top of this set of adjustments that corresponds to my mask, and I'm going to click Invert. And now let's go ahead and analyze it. So I see a couple of little issues. One is that I have some masking going on my leaf at the bottom, and I have a loss of mask, or didn't capture it in the little nooks and crannies between the stem and the leaves. So we now have the ability to add, subtract, or intersect the mask with. Okay, I'm going to, in this case, start with the subtraction. So let's subtract using a brush that's loaded with 100% flow, and I will increase the size of the brush and just come down and brush it off. So remember, I selected the subtraction option, and then I'm going to reverse that and add a little bitty brush right here. So we're going to say add brush, and let's go ahead and zoom in. That's Command or Control equals, and I want a very small brush, and I think I'll bring the feather down just a little bit and see if I can come in here and just increase the mask right there and right here. Okay, so that looks good to me. You know, I'm just a little stickler about details. Okay, let's back out. Press Z to zoom fit to window, and it looks great. Now, if you want to toggle the mask off, you can press the keyboard shortcut O for overlay, or you can go in and uncheck the overlay just like that. However, you don't need to do that with the new Lightroom. You can just start making your adjustments, because as soon as you do, the mask is going to disappear. So let's hop back up on the mask and increase the exposure. I'm going to just type the number 2 in here and say enter. And then I'm going to lower the temperature so that I have kind of a nice royal blue. It looks like kind of a glow behind my light painted tulip. All right, that looks good to me. Something I noticed though, however, is that the upper right is darker than the lower left. So I want to balance that out. Therefore, I'm going to add a linear gradient on my image. All right, I'm going to click on the little plus symbol up here and come down to linear gradient. With my crosshair here, I'm going to bring it down to a little bit below the area where I see that transition between the brighter lower left and the darker upper right. So we'll come down about in here and drag up in the same direction as the stem and flower. The farther apart your lines are, the smoother the transition. The closer they are together, the harsher the transition or feather. So let's pull that down, and I'm going to lower the exposure just a little bit, like this. Okay, and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to try and turn that bottom a little bit more purple. I'm just moving the hue slider here down at the bottom. And the next thing I'm going to do is remove it from the subject. So if I click on that mask icon here in the masking panel, I will go to subtract, select subject. It's detecting the subject. And let's hover over that and see now whether it did a good job. Yes, not so bad. I have a little bit here on the lower portion of the leaf, which I can remove or just leave it there. And I'm fine with leaving it there because I like it when there's a little bit of harmony, when there's some overlap with the masking that I do or the adjustments that I make and my subject. Okay, the next thing that I'd like to do is add a radial gradient around my flower. So let's go ahead up to the plus, or again, keyboard shortcut, Shift M, and pick up a radial gradient. I'll start with my crosshair here around the flower and drag it up and out. And you can just kind of pull it from the handles. I'm going to go outside of it until I get the little curved icon with the arrows on each end and tilt it so that it's also aligned with my flower. I'm going to move it up here and I'm going to pull it out wider, and then I'm going to hold the option key down and pull just on the left hand side so that it comes out a little bit farther to the left than the right, and then I'm going to reposition it and keep reshaping it. I like using the radial gradient because I love the curvature that you get around the edges. So now with this one, I'm going to increase the exposure just a little bit, and I'm going to shift the hue slider until it starts to turn a little bit pinkish purple. Okay, about like that. And as you can see, it's also affecting my flower. So I want to get it off the flowers. I'm going to do the same thing that I did earlier. I'm going to subtract my subject. And there it is. Okay, I'm eyeing the radial gradient now, and I think I'd like to adjust it a little bit more so that it covers a little bit more of that left edge and maybe over here. So let's click on it. You've got to find the pin, and I'm going to pull it out a little bit more uniformly, and I'm going to elongate it slightly, and again asymmetrically, holding that option key down, and I'll bring it out there just like this and bring it up. Okay, let's close that. You can either hit Shift M or just go up here to create a new mask, which is going to be our final mask, and that's going to be a vignette. So I've got my crosshairs here. I'm going to start somewhere in the middle and drag it up and over to create a final vignette or oval. I'm going to act outside of it, so I'm going to check the invert box, and I will tilt it. Again, I want everything to kind of line up with my subject, and I want to pull it out quite far. When you get to the point where you can't go any farther, you need to reduce the size of your image. So just go ahead and press Command or Control minus, and now you can pull out beyond the boundaries of your image itself. Okay, and I'm going to start to make the adjustments so I can see if I need to come back. It's a very iterative process. I may want to reshape it. All right, so with this one, I'm going to lower the exposure like this, and yeah, I'm going to bring it in a little bit. Okay, and let's lower that, zoom a little bit, and come up to the top, tilt it a little bit more. Okay, and then press the letter Z to zoom it right back to fit to screen. Okay, that looks good to me. I'm going to close that radial gradient, and it looks like I'm almost done. Let's close all of our masks by just going down to the bottom of the mask panel and saying close. We're going to go down to effects and put a uniform gradient, a uniform vignette around the whole image. So this does not allow you to brush it off, change the color, or tilt it in any way. It's either just going to be dark or light. So I'm going to go to the dark side. I'm going to reduce the feather to 0 so I can actually see where it's landing, and I'm going to just shape it up a little bit. I'm moving my midpoint and roundness sliders. And when I get it where I think I'm going to like it, I'm going to bring the feather up significantly and then come back up to amount and just lower that amount. And work with the sliders until it looks like something that works well for my taste. Going back and forth, looking here again, and feathering it. Okay, and I'm going to come back up in the basic panel and just lower the highlights a tiny bit more. There we go. Okay, so this is my finished image. Let's have a look at the before and after. Pressing the letter Y and then Shift Tab to fly all my panels out. A double L to turn the lights off. A single L dims them. A double L turns them all off so you can see your image against black. And I can see on the right hand side I've got the beginning straight out of camera shot, and then on the left I have altered the background and created a nice kind of a spotlight on the background, which is something that I love doing in camera with gels and lights, but Now that we've got so many different tools in Lightroom, it's quite fun to do it this way. Okay, thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing what you can do.